Okay, thank you for coming. I'm Jan Ozer. I'll be your moderator for this session. I think everyone's familiar with the promise of HEVC, H.265, the next generation codec from H.264. If I was to summarize the benefit, it would be same quality at 50% of the data rate. That's going to enable people to save bandwidth costs. It's going to get video in places you couldn't get HD video in before. And everything sounds grand, but the hard part is always making it work and getting it implemented. And we have three speakers today who are kind of where the rubber meets the road. Mark Cousins is a product manager with Elemental Technologies. They make one of the most successful live encoders. They came out a few months ago and said all of their live and on-demand encoders will be field upgradable to H.265. And I'm looking forward to hearing what he's going to tell us about the encoding market going forward, when that's going to be available, how many people are using it, and when and why. Will Laws with Akamai. We've all seen Will's name in many, many articles. I met him for the first time today, and it's a pleasure to be on the same panel with him. And I use the Akamai website, their streaming, what do you call that? The report, the streaming media report that says, what's the average bandwidth, what's the average, who can send. Yeah, so it's State of the Internet report. I refer to that in pretty much every discussion I ever produce because they're the guys who tell us, what's the average bandwidth in France. And you really need to know that, right? And it's a great company, and a great information source. And then Thomas Kramer is a vice president and product manager for MainConcept, which is a division of Rovi. MainConcept is one of the leading H.264 codecs out there. If you use Adobe Media Coder, Sorensen Squeeze, Telestream Episode, a number of other products, you've been encoding H.264 with the MainConcept codec. Very high quality, very good performance. So these are the guys who are going to be producing the H.264 file, or H.265 and HEVC files and distributing them. And the format of today's discussion is going to be, they'll spend 7 or 8 minutes telling us about what their company does, what the challenges are for HEVC in their space, and then we'll take questions. That'll take us about 25, 26 minutes into the presentation, and then we'll take questions from the audience. So we are going to start with Mark Cousins, who is Product Management Live Compression for Elemental Technologies.
Thanks, Jan, and I think my 8-minute counter is running now. This is like a congressional hearing. We have all the writers down in front here who are recording what we're doing. Yes, I am Mark Cousins. I am with Elemental, and I'm responsible for the live encoding product line. And at NAB, we did announce and demonstrate live encoding using HEVC for the first time in our products, and one of the earliest adopters in the industry. Let me familiarize you with Elemental for those of you who may not know us. We got started in 2006 in Portland, Oregon, from a core of technologists from Pixelworks. And they worked with that company developing their video ICs and decided that, there's maybe another approach to this, and our heritage has become software encoders on accelerated hardware. I won't go into all the details of the funding and all that, but our markets are really addressing at first, video on demand, file to file, and then about 2 years ago, we came out with our live product, which has actually eclipsed the file to file product. The market interest in live has been spectacular. This is changing by itself. In terms of the solution, I'm sure I didn't touch that. In terms of the solutions, Elemental Live is an appliance that takes all manner of streaming inputs, either SDI or IP-based, and then produces as outputs any number of streams not any number, but a large number of streams packaged the way you want for all the popular targets. Companion to that is Elemental Server, a similar appliance-based product, but that's strictly file to file and proceeds as fast as possible. We, as I said, are the first to market with HM 10.0 compliant HEVC. That product is actually shipping now in both of our live and our file-based transcoding solutions. As I said earlier, our focus is software-based video processing, so decode of the input, transcode to another codec, one or more, transcode using another codec, and then packaging, all in the same appliance. We see the initial applications for HEVC as start off in a closed system, because this doesn't involve having to convert external either customers or their appliances. So we have talked to a number of people who might switch to HEVC for bitrate reduction on backhaul and contribution links. 4K, as those of you who are at NAB, has become the hot topic. There are some of us that were a little skeptical that maybe it's going to go the way of 3D. I guess I no longer think so. I think there's enough traction there and enough of a value proposition for customers. I still think it's going to be a specialized market because not many consumers have the space for it, but those that do will want it. And you can think of HEVC as being a big enabler for 4K. You may be aware that the Japanese government has mandated that the Japanese television providers offer the World Cup in 2014 in 4K. They may offer it in HD, but they must offer it in 4K. Following on with that, OTT to smart TVs and PCs, again, where you have control over the devices, and then VOD and hard media, that's a lot softer. We don't know where that's going or how long that will take. What are our customers telling us? As I was telling Will, and he agrees with this, the interest is really in bandwidth reduction as opposed to improving quality. So HEVC offers between 40 and 50% reduction in bandwidth for the same quality, and that seems to be the focus that customers are on. The degradation as bits become unavailable is also much more pleasant to the eye. We went out and asked customers a few months ago, when do you plan to test or evaluate HEVC? The answers were quite surprising. As soon as possible was over 40%. So people have a strong interest in this. They really believe that it can solve a lot of problems for them, and it can reduce costs by reducing bandwidth. The challenges, number one on the challenge list has to be the device support. The existing installed base of set-top boxes, the existing installed base of tablets, the existing installed base of handsets, mobile phones. None of them, the set-top boxes can't handle it at all. The tablets and the handsets may be able to with a software upgrade, but you're not going to like the battery life. So until there's silicon or some other support that improves the device decode capabilities, that's going to be a challenge for everybody. Along hand in hand with that is availability of players. As someone who makes the encode side of this equation, we've been desperate to find players that, to prove what we're doing is working or makes sense, and that's been really tough. But it is improving day by day. Legacy support is a huge issue for our customers. The H.264 only or the MPEG-2 only set-top boxes aren't going to go away anytime soon. So for them, in some ways, HEVC, it can be an additional headache. Now there's a third codec to support. So they have to weigh the benefits very carefully there. The computational demands, that's absolutely the biggest challenge for people like us and for our customers. We have found through measurement that HEVC takes between 4 and 6 times the processing power needed for a similar encode of H.264. On the decode side, that's harder to quantify, but we think it's between 1.5 and 2.5 times. It's definitely an increase. But the bandwidth gain is likely to trump the equipment cost. So the equipment is the sunk cost one time. The bandwidth gain, you earn back every day. So it does make sense in that case. Support for NLE or support by NLEs is non-existent at the moment, but I'm sure will come. This is not a terribly good mezzanine format. You won't see people storing in H.265, HEVC, and then editing in that, but it will be an output of some of these editors. Standards ratification has been a nightmare. There are something like, I forget, 500 patents that have something to do with HEVC. The wrappers standards haven't been ratified yet. The codec standard is finally ratified, and that's a lot of work. I have 1 minute and 13 seconds left. So the question is, when do we think the HEVC will hit the mainstream? It will hit the mainstream when some of the problems on the previous screen are solved. My personal view is that's 18 to 24 to 30 months from now. Replacing the handsets, replacing the tablets, replacing the set-top boxes, all that kind of thing is going to be the thing that allows HEVC to go mainstream. We have seen that happen for 264. Comcast cable is a notable exception in that their terrestrial cable stuff is still all MPEG-2 because of the install base of set-tops. They may jump directly to HEVC, they and others who have that MPEG-2. They may just skip 264 altogether. And the free-to-air remains an open question. We have no idea where that's going to go. What am I doing? I'm done. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, Jan, and thanks everyone for attending this session. My name's Will, and as you mentioned, I work at Akamai. Very brief intro. I have 14 slides and 8 minutes, 43 seconds per slide, so I'm going to be talking quickly because there's a lot I want to say about HEVC. We're a large CDN. You probably know us in that. We're doing a lot more besides media delivery, but that's the context I'm going to be speaking about us today. We don't have big gleaming halls full of servers. What we do have is thousands of small regions, probably about the size of your office, filled with a couple of hundred servers, and we have thousands of those spread around ISPs in the world. That's how we deliver traffic. We deliver today about 10.5 to 11 terabits per second. So that's 11,000 gigabits per second across the network. Okay, and we deliver content for all top 30 media and entertainment companies. So we are right at the nexus of HEVC. It is going to impact our business by several $100 million, and I'm going to explain in which direction I think that's going to go in future slides. As I mentioned, we're seeing a lot of traffic. I made this screenshot. All our data is public about what's flowing through. We published a State of the Internet report. We also got live stats. So this was at Thursday, 10:30 at night, and we're pushing 1.8 million concurrent streams and dealing with 13 million requests per second. And each of those requests we log, and we get a lot of good data, and I'm going to show you some of that today. So we're facing an explosion or growth in over-the-top and video delivery. This is our traffic for the last 3 years. Notice that jump from 2009 to 2012. That is due to video. Like the internet in general, we're delivering now about 2/3 of our content is video. We expect that to go up to 85 or 90% by 2016, 2017, 2018. We're also showing projections up to 2015, much higher here, 50 terabits per second. That is what we're building our network out to, because that is what that demand curve is doing. Okay, we're a tiny amount, a tiny fraction of content is compared to broadcast cable is delivered over the top today, and that's only going to explode in that direction. So I want to offer a somewhat strange analogy you might think at the start. I'm going to talk about the sword of HEVC, okay, and I'm going to use the ex-governor of California to help illustrate it. So here's Arnold, and my point with the sword is you can, I was going to say you can swing it both ways, but that doesn't really sound good. You can cut in both directions. So if you cut to the right, you cut your bandwidth in half while preserving quality. And if you cut to the other side, you're basically on improved quality while preserving bandwidth. So you can use your sword in two directions, and I think we're going to see different parts of the market segment deploy the sword of HEVC in different ways. So what are some of those use cases? The first one, as Mark already mentioned, is to cut bandwidth. This is going to happen first in the mobile sector, where we're bandwidth constrained, we're constrained in throughput from the towers. Okay, it's going to open up new segments such as OTT delivery. Will you watch your Netflix on your cable line when you got inside your bandwidth cap? Maybe, if we can squeeze the bandwidth down enough. You can also open up a new market segment, which is the lower-end DSL subscribers. And I've got a slide on that coming up. You can also use it to cut bandwidth on your existing users, so people with 4K and up. 4 megabits per second and up, not 4K. And you can use it to deliver them quality parity, but at a lower bandwidth. Another use case is to improve quality. So again, to the set-top box, TV, and OTT customers, you can actually increase the quality of what they're getting. And this is an important point. And actually, what I was speaking with Mark, I actually have an opposite opinion. I think HEVC is going to be used more to raise the quality in the long term than it is going to be used to save bandwidth. The reason is there's tremendous consumer pressure to always have better quality. When everyone else is using the same codec, the only way to distinguish yourself as a company is to push more bandwidth now and get better quality. And if you've looked at streaming media today, we get used to it in the streaming world. You look at a 3.5 meg AVC stream and you think that looks all right. And then you go up to your hotel room and look at a real digital transmission. It looks so much better. And the point is 3.5 megs on AVC isn't equivalent to what you're getting in digital on your cable box. Maybe 3.5, 4, 5 megs on HEVC is. It's looking really good. And I think people are going to be forced to use HEVC in the direction of improving quality. It can also make new facilities, new products feasible, like 4K. So we're also seeing 4K interest. I laughed. I said, we're trying to do 720p and we're still not good at it. You know, we buffer on everything known to man at 720. How are we going to do 4K? But there is a slice of the market that can do that. If you've got Fios, or you're living in Korea, or you're living in Japan, with HEVC at 12 to 15 meg, you can get a 4K transmission, and that is going to come. And it won't be the entire market, but it'll be a portion of it. And its multiplier effect on bandwidth is so great that it can almost double the throughput if even just 10 or 12% of the people switch to 4K. Strangely blurred out here, but this is some of the data from our State of the Internet, and I realize you're too far back to see this, but this is showing mobile connection speeds. So we're measuring 13 million measurements every second. This is aggregate data. It's pretty accurate. If you look in the United States, you see that we're looking average throughput on mobile, 2.6, 4.6, 1.3 megabits per second on 4G LTE. This is a subset. So that's pretty reasonable. That says, hey, if I take HEVC and push it through at those bit rates, I can do 720p 30 at reasonable quality. So there's a market opportunity that I think HEVC is going to be used for. This is a slide from AT&T showing their data packages. Notice they, on the lowest one, they neglect to show the bandwidth because it's a paltry 768 kilobits per second. That's their base offering. That's not something you can push 720p 30 through today, but with HEVC, maybe you can. So we can start seeing the lower end of the market. We can apply the quality benefits and raise people, sell services into a section of the market you couldn't sell them before. This is a worldwide map. We gather data on which countries in the world, what percentage of people are above 4 megabits per second. And we choose that level because that's the level at which you're starting to get decent over-the-top quality. And you see the global average is 42%, United States 64%, a whole lot of countries higher, going up to South Korea at 86%. Again, the text is too small. My point here is these are consumers with bandwidth to spare. This is the market opportunity where HEVC can be used to increase the quality, to get 1080p, maybe 60 frames per second instead of 720 at 30. And for sports and other formats like that, it makes a big difference. Quick slide about VP9. It's free, isn't it? So HEVC doesn't stand a chance. I'm not so optimistic. I think Nokia have thrown a recent licensing wrench into VP9. I think the pervasiveness of H.264 means that the performance and not the price of VP9 has to be better than HEVC to displace it. H.264 is the incumbent. And even if you make something free, I think people prefer. They understand H.264, and certainly large companies, the kind that are driving the majority of the bandwidth in the world, they prefer a stable licensing system. So I think MPEG-LA will eventually corral all the patent holders for HEVC, and I know there's some standouts at the moment, but it's in their mutual interests to try to extract revenue from a single pool. And I think they're going to learn the lessons from H.264 and they're going to apply them to HEVC. And I think we, the industry, are going to gobble that up. So the big question, will Akamai media traffic go up or down because of HEVC? And I don't think it's going to go down. I think there's going to be an inflection point, and then it's going to go up and go up quickly. And here's why. So over-the-top traffic is growing at 40% annually. That means it doubles every 2 years. So even if we switch to HEVC overnight for all our content, in 2 years' time, we would have lost that gain. We'd be back to where we are today. And that doesn't take into account new services that HEVC is going to bring in, all the new people you can reach with content. It doesn't take into account accelerated growth from the fact that now your quality is better and you watch more of it. Nor does it take the competitive pressure, as I mentioned previously, that people are always pushed to deliver lower quality. You don't care the bandwidth your provider has to pay to deliver you your stream. You just care about how good it looks. And as I mentioned earlier, one 4K stream at 15 megs is 15 times the bandwidth of a 1 meg HEVC stream at 720p. So even if I can switch 10% of my audience starts watching 4K, I've essentially doubled my throughput. Okay. So these are all reasons why I think we'll get a little downturn in throughput. But in the end, HEVC is going to push traffic. So it's going to open up new market segments and open up new higher resolutions at a faster rate than it is used to achieve these quality parity reductions.
Hello. Yeah, Tom Kramer from Rovi. I'm with Rovi since a couple of years already, basically through an acquisition. And so Rovi has many services for the entertainment market, data services, advertising service, and including a video delivery service. And that's actually what we are talking about here now, because that's where HEVC is quite relevant and will be relevant too. So actually going into going into a little bit more technical details here than the guys before. What's the benefit about HEVC at all? As it was mentioned already, of course, the efficiency of the compression is better. So basically, you have, cut off the bandwidth of your video delivery, which is quite compelling and, of course, a huge benefit. And that's where most of the people think HEVC will be most valuable for the market. But there are, with that coming also other advantages, right? HEVC also has a quite good algorithm internally that allows to resolve an H.264 downside that you had, artifacts in some of the lower bitrate encodings. So overall, it was already mentioned, an HEVC encoding looks much smoother than an H.264. So that is something that the consumer experience will definitely grow through that as well. Since the bandwidth and also the storage will be lower with an HEVC encoding, the DVR capacity will be increasing through that. So you will have better or more storage with the video that you're actually recording. Also, there are some formats already being announced, and it was already mentioned that some of the countries actually are planning to have HEVC services. So this is here an ATSC 3.0 is kind of a potential candidate to use HEVC in the future. And of course, HEVC is is actually the first codec that is by design already planned for 4K and 8K resolution. So how do we get that great technology to the market? How does the adoption really look like? And it was already mentioned there are quite a few challenges that are coming with that. Honestly, a codec has to evolve over time. So H.264 is still evolving. So there are coming new encoder versions out regularly with better compression than before. So HEVC is a new format and new codec, and the implementations will, of course, improve over time as well. So we are in the early versions of this codec. So the promised 50% or something will probably be sometime later and not in the first year or something of a new codec. So that's definitely some issues there. On the chicken and egg side, it was already mentioned, there is a kind of demand. The demand has to grow for HEVC because the TV manufacturers, the set-top box, they need content. And it was already mentioned in our keynote this morning from ESPN, content is king. So we have to really get HEVC content into the market. It's not only the premium content like Hollywood blockbusters or something, it has to be the user-generated content as well. And so that, from that side, growing the HEVC demand will then on the other side create the demand for the CE manufacturers to start, coming out with HEVC devices. So it is not only the codec, it's not only the format, you have to really get the whole value chain with an HEVC enabled. And of course, HEVC doesn't come for free. It is quite resource intensive, and so it needs pretty long time to do the encoding. Decoding is relatively straightforward. It's not straightforward, but compared to an H.264 is relatively similar. But the encoding side is quite intensive, and so it takes much longer time to encode your content into that. While you want to launch an HEVC service, you really have to convert all the catalog into the new codec, which of course is quite a challenge as well. So the content owners will have to get, the tools in hand, have to take their time to do the conversion of that of their catalog. A report from Dan, Frost, and Sullivan. We have requested that, and so received that kind of timeline. I think it's quite interesting, and I think what we already mentioned, we have some services will actually launch with HEVC this year, but that's something that will be a closed system, so you won't see really a mass deployment of that. It is something where you have control over the production side, the encoding, delivery, and the display. So the formats will be, HEVC will be used, and that probably by later this year. But everything beyond that will be really, it was said 12 to 16, 15 months from now. And it's also mentioned already here that the actual formats, the packaging, MP4, transport stream, most of these haven't been finalized yet. So it's something that everybody is really waiting for, to have the final specification, because video compression is not the only thing for a video delivery service. So how are we in Rovi trying to solve the issue with basic value, the whole value chain? We call it the Rovi's end-to-end solution. So we provide the encoding tools on the professional side, left side here, for encoding into the various HEVC profiles. We have a DivX service in the middle, which is defining a profile for the video delivery. It has the Hollywood approved, studio approved DRM and delivery with it. And on the DivX certification side, we include guaranteed file playback for the CE devices. And this is how we at Rovi are trying to solve the issue with the chicken and egg. So we produce the content, we deliver the tools to the market so that content can be created, but we also make sure that the devices will be enabled with that exciting technology. Parts of that DivX video service that's been being enabled with HEVC is really the core technology underneath. It's the MainConcept codec SDK, and that SDK is being enabled, of course, with the HEVC video encoding and decoding. A little bit of details how you can actually look at some kind of video codec. It is a low-level component, a shared library or a shared object that you integrate into your applications for producing HEVC content. This is basically available for Windows, Linux, and other platforms like Mac. Optimized, runs efficiently on most of the multi-core systems. We are trying to accelerate the market adoption for HEVC through the Dash Industry Forum, where we are participating and trying to improve that integration for HEVC into Dash. 9 seconds? Wow. Should have told me before. Okay. One last feature that we've done here actually to overcome the time to convert your whole catalog into HEVC is the smart adaptive bitrate encoding technology. I'm not going into detail that, but that's something that really accelerates the conversion of a whole catalog. If you look at that, it shows the lower bar actually is the reduced amount of time that you need for a conversion of a regular H9 quality or 9-layer quality HEVC encoding into multiple bit rates. So I think with that I'm closing that.
Okay. Quick technical question about HEVC. So last thing you said, gentleman from Rovi, was about ABR, which I hadn't even thought about until you mentioned it. HEVC in an HLS package, does it fit inside an MPEG-2 transport stream or not?
It's for Thomas. Thomas, do you?
Sure, yeah, it will. Right now there is a draft of the specification. Is that on actually?
Do you have him?
There's a draft of the MPEG transport stream specification for HEVC but that's not something that you would expect by the end of the year. So something really coming later. Other formats like an MP4 container, like fragmentation for HEVC, that's promised to be earlier, and that's the thing that will be most likely be used by a dash HEVC implementation.
Okay, I'll do that. Vanna White's not here. Yeah, who's next?
I just wonder if somebody has one now, or when will one be available, an HEVC encoder that can handle 4K real time at a high complexity level for live broadcast? Is that in our lifetime, or?
You're looking at me. That is in our lifetime. We have a prototype that's close. We're not quite there for real-time frame rate yet, but we expect, I would say, in the next 6 months to be able to offer such a thing. That's apparently of interest. And that, again, is something that my friends in Japan are very concerned about for their leading the World Cup requirement.
Next question.
Speaking of World Cup, you were talking about content being necessary, HEVC content first and foremost, and the chicken and egg issue. Do you guys see sports being the primary driver for that kind of content in the first few years? Is that going to be the primary demand, or is it going to be large-scale, big-budget movies? Where's a lot of this first HEVC content going to come from, and therefore some of the 4K content?
Will, do you have a visibility on that?
Yeah, certainly. So one of the benefits of HEVC is it's normally deployed, and these guys can contradict me, at 60 frames per second. It's done very nicely. And that's a huge benefit if you look at sports. 30 frames per second, we're used to the tennis ball. You see it quantized jumps across the screen. At 60 frames per second, you don't. So even if you just do 720p 60 with HEVC, it's really a compelling sports option. You don't need to throw a lot of bandwidth at it. It's a much smoother decode. It looks much better for sports. So I think sports will be one of the prime adopters, and also big budget movies. When you're getting to the large screen, you want to push 1080 onto a screen that can support it with surround sound and everything else that makes it into the premium theater experience. It'll go there. It matters less if it's embedded video. If you're looking at a CNN clip on a web page, does it matter? Like, no, you don't. As long as you can sort of see it clearly, you've got a minimum, you're watching it for 15 seconds, you're gone.
Okay, we got somebody behind you. You'll be next.
Okay, so you were doing the chicken and egg analogy, and I think there's like a pre-chicken egg thing. Because obviously you need the encoders or some version of the encoders in the marketplace to start with for anybody to do any of the work. But it sounded to me, and I just wanted to check, that Elemental already has H.265 encoder available.
That's correct. We started shipping that actually in the last couple of weeks, and we demonstrated it at NAB.
Okay, and the MainConcept SDK, is that also available?
That is available now, yes.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
You mentioned 15 megabits was the data rate for 4K that was on a few of the screens, and I'm just wondering if 15 megabits is the sweet spot for H.265, or was that more of an accommodation for available telcos?
So yeah, I put up the figure 12 to 15. That was after speaking to another encoding company. But this encoding company this encoding company might have a different figure. Is that the sweet spot? I think it's way too early to say it's a sweet spot. That's a spot that it's been done at, and the quality is acceptable. I mean, and there's PSNR. There's a million ways to measure quality. There's also perceived quality from the end user. So to say it's a sweet spot is premature, but it's at least in that range, I would.
Yeah, so if I can jump in, I think that's right. I also believe, though, that the 4K customer is going to be more demanding of quality than your average 1920 customer is going to be, because they will have invested a lot of money in their equipment and their home theater. So things we get away with in the HD world may not be as acceptable in the 4K world. So from my early analysis, I think it's 18 to 22 is the range of acceptable quality. And again, 60 frames a second influences this, and so on. So there's a lot of dials and knobs.
Unless your end user is sitting 4 feet away from their 4K monitor, though, they're not going to appreciate all the pixels. We're going to great efforts to send them. So I think we can fool a lot of people by sending them 1080 to their 4K screen. They'll be just as happy.
That's absolutely true.
For half the price, sit in your couch, and if you really want to pull a chair up, you can enjoy your 4K.
Okay, question over here.
Yeah, I suppose this could be for MainConcepts. With the high frame rates, we now have an issue of devices that don't support the high frame rates. And I wonder if you've done any research or any thoughts on half frame rate or 2 encodes versus temporal scaling.
No, we haven't. Although, I mean, we have defined the profile for the certification for the TV manufacturers really on their request. So that really is something that, I mean, we have worked together with them that the different frame rates are supported there. And I think, so your question is about if we will support.
I mean, we're in discussion with TV vendors, and we're finding out that like the first generation is going to be 60 up to 1080p, and then it's going to drop to 30.
Right.
And we're wondering, does this mean we're going to have a 30 frame per second 4K stream and a 60 frame as the next generation comes out, or if we'd be able to leverage temporal scaling or some other ability to have both frame rates in a single stream?
It's definitely the HDMI restriction right now for 4K 60p, right? So you definitely can't do that right now. Something that we will see next version of it. I don't think I know anything about the temporal scale, so I can't really comment on that. Can you?
So I can jump in a little bit. There's another option, and that's DisplayPort. DisplayPort does support 4K at 60, and there are 4K sets that are available with it. Whether that becomes widely adopted over HDMI, I don't know. But HDMI 2.0 is the only thing that supports 60, and it's not even defined yet. Your question, though, really would only apply if the TV is doing the decoding, then the problem is solved. If another device is doing the encoding and supplying to the TV via HDMI is where we have this issue. I'm a big proponent of DisplayPort because of this, because it has that problem solved today.
Any more questions from the audience? Yeah, we got a gentleman back here.
Do you see the encoding overhead going from H.264 to H.265 being 3x to 4x? Is this consistent across the board, or?
Sorry, I didn't get that fully.
So the question is, how much additional processing power is required to encode HEVC versus H.264? And why don't we get both you guys, Mark and Thomas, answering that?
Sure. So for the encoding, time that you would need, it is something that 3 to 5 times that you would need compared to an H.264 codec. That's what we are seeing in pure software. I guess Mark is doing some kind of GPU stuff as well, is that?
Right, and we're seeing the same thing. It takes about 3 to 4 to 5 times the cycles, if you will. Now, that's either longer time or more processing power, but either way, it's an expenditure. But I found it's very consistent.
Yep.
You can jump in here. My crystal ball doesn't predict that that's going to get a lot better.
No.
I think the algorithms are just so involved, and the tools are there's so many choices. 35 motion vectors per macro block now.
Yeah,
possible.
To support live, you have to go like 4x the hardware.
Correct. Yeah.
So this is for Will, because I know he hobnobs with all the bigwigs, but we're not hearing anything about HEVC in Flash Player or on the Apple platform, on the Android platform. All these, we're hearing OTT, but we're not hearing desktop, we're not hearing mobile. So what are you hearing with your high-level sources?
My high-level sources will shoot me because they got a high-level security guard. It would certainly make sense. I think Flash Player, you got to look at its future. It's definitely video over Flash is going towards prime time now. So if it's within prime time's interests to deploy that, then there's a good chance it might happen. The other area I think we can start looking at it in browser playback. So you look at the MSE and the EME initiatives coming on right now. I personally think that's an area of great opportunity for building cross-platform players.
Okay, what's ESD and EME?
MSE is media source extensions for the browser, and EME is encrypted media extensions. So these are an additional API on the video tag in HTML that allows you to supply adaptive segmented content using JavaScript to read a manifest, JavaScript to make the requests, and then the browser's doing the hard work of the decoding. So if Google and Chrome and Microsoft, who are also interested in this and very supportive of the spec, if they want their browser to be on the device and be the preeminent player environment, then they have to look seriously at HEVC. But we'll need to go to those companies. None of them has mentioned anything yet, made any public statements about that, but it has to be in their interests.
Okay, anybody else? I got a couple more because I came prepared. What do we know about the royalty picture? Because that's, for me, that's a big, when is it going to clarify? Do we have any preliminary numbers? Do we know if, royalty that's free will be free to encode with HEVC? What do we know?
Yeah, so far, MPEG-LA is, hoped to be covering all the patents, but there have been some companies who claim to have patents in there mentioning that they won't go with MPEG-LA. So right now it's a little bit of a wait state where we're actually not sure where that's going to be. But hopefully, MPEG-LA will have all the patents under one big portfolio. They do not really, at least not to us, do not really disclaim, open up any timeline for it. So what we've done, we've requested that regular from them, but as far as I know, they have not really mentioned anything about timeline.
We've had the same experience at Elemental. Part of this is driven by the experience of the patent holders with H.264, who feel like they were cheated, and that they could have earned a lot more revenue had the licensing structure been different. And so they're desperate not to make that mistake again with 265, which drives the likes of us crazy because we have to pay these licenses. We're happy to pay them, but we don't know what to do yet.
And that will really help, not help the adoption of the new codec, because it's completely unclear where the royalties will be paid for.
And just to clarify a comment that Will made, not that, he wasn't unclear, he just didn't really describe it all that much because he was limited time, but Nokia has sued Google for VP9. So in multiple jurisdictions, including Germany and I think the UK. So even though Google is aggressively pushing VP9, if you're a deep-pocketed company like Microsoft and Apple, you're not going to put it in the browser because there's a really good chance that Nokia will come and sue you. So we're at this situation from our, we've got two alternatives. One, we don't know what it costs, and one, we don't know if we're going to get sued if we use it. So that's kind of the dilemma where we are right now. And companies like these three up here are spending a lot of development dollars in a very unclear picture because they know they need to push forward, but as a user, it's a pretty unclear picture at this point.
Is Nokia claiming patent infringement?
Yes. Will, are you familiar with?
Yeah, I read the same articles everyone else does. I'm not an expert in the legal background there, but yeah, it's thrown a cloud a bit on the VP9 announcements that came out of Google I/O. And just, despite what Google might say, I think the best thing about VP8 was it forced the perpetual free license changes for H.264, which has really made H.264 dominant. H.264 is 99% of the video that moves on the web today. That's a tremendous benefit to us. It makes our life so much easier. You can go from Mac to PC to Android, everything plays it. And we take that for granted sometimes. So it's in everyone's mutual interest that same level of portability is there for HEVC. And I think over time it will come through.
Okay, and I'm pulling up an article on the VP9 point at Streaming Media. So it talks about the issue and kind of points to a blog that is very authoritative from a patent perspective. So, Google is going to be pushing VP9, and I think it's, until that gets resolved, it's going to be hard to, certainly if you're a big, a deep-pocketed company to implement that. Okay, anything else?